Subscription MMOs seem to be on the way out. Yeah, I was a bit a defender of the concept early on, knowing that server costs and frequent updates to a game were usually more than a payoff for what the game expected you to pay monthly, but shifting markets and current trends have shown that MMOs can be perfectly viable without a monthly monetary commitment, but also be profitable as well. With buy-to-play and free-to-play MMOs coming far from the days of being mostly poorly translated pay-to-win grinders, we're seeing more and more MMOs give way to the shift in the market. However, early on, many saw subscription games turning free-to-play as a death knell for the game, and while I can only name a single game off the top of my head that was converted from subscription and is no longer around now, many games that have done this have seen increased profits and are doing far better than they were when they required subscriptions. The more pressing matter, to quote something I saw once written on a forum, is that free-to-play isn't so much the death of a game, it's the death of its community. I can see that. It means that your formerly favorite secluded subgame will be swarmed with a myriad of spam bots advertising their gold-selling sites, and new players looking for a free-to-play fix that will come in, tank the in-game economy, be obnoxious, make a mess of things, and then inevitably leave. But is this always the case? What if a subgame was doing perfectly fine on its own and decided to switch over to free-to-play even when it had no reason to? This is the MMO Grinder, and it's time to look at Rift. Released in March of 2011 and developed and published by Trion Worlds, Rift is a fantasy world MMO very similar in design to the MMO titan World of Warcraft, but with many differences and tweaked features that I'll get into as we go along. Rift takes place in the world of Talara, a world under constant siege from differing elemental planes of existence, attempting to invade through various rifts that appear along the world. You play as an Ascended, a warrior whose task is to defeat these elemental forces as they appear. Rift also features the common faction gameplay element of two forces with the same goal but differing ideals, like the Guardians, those resurrected by the Vigil after dying in the first battle featured in the tutorial, while the second faction, the Defiants, have come from an alternate future where the Vigil failed to stop the invading forces, and having placed their faith in science, create their own versions of the Ascended to send back in time and stop the invasion before it's too late. Same goal, far different ideologies. Despite what certain shock media might tell you, Rift was one of the few games that converted from free-to-play from a position of strength. They recently released an expansion last year, and they weren't in any sort of dire straits that would have caused them to make the switch. But has this fairly popular game strayed too far from its original intentions now that it's a free-to-play? Let's take a look. Rift can be a pretty looking game. It's based very much on flashy effects with lights and particles everywhere. Much more so than any other MMO I've played, or at least those based in a fantasy world. Like I mentioned with Defiance, the game does well with the environment it has, despite it not really being top of the line graphically. Unlike Defiance, it does allow for a lot more graphical tweaks and tends to be a bit harder to run. I've completed massive arcfall events in Defiance without a hiccup, and in Rift my frame rate starts to chug with even a bit more than 12 people showing up to a minor Rift event. It's really based more on its insane amount of particle effects, so you might want to tweak that if this game is giving you too many problems. The interface is pretty standard and can be fully and easily adjusted by hitting the Edit Layout option in the Settings key. I found myself tweaking the size to be a bit smaller and adding the Target of Target feature, and then moving where that block appears to be much higher. It's nice that they give you full control over it all. Otherwise, it's a rather great looking game once you get accustomed to the art design. It might be a pretty standard fantasy world, but the effects can be downright impressive and amazing, my favorites involving the elemental rifts, which can darken the screen or give off a certain colored filter when you're in the presence of one. And it's simply awesome to watch the rifts descend into the world, like the massive flowered plants of the Life Rift, or the flowing pools of lava and stone with the Fire Rifts. There is a lot of cool and thematic stuff to look at. Another interesting area is the Realm of the Fae instance, where the seasons change as you progress through the dungeon, ending finally on winter during a massive blizzard that covers the playfield so much that the players and the monsters become barely visible black shadows. Feel free to explore and take it all in. As music goes, this is a really good soundtrack, composed by Inon Zur of Dragon Age Origins fame, among many other titles. However, like many typical 3D fantasy MMOs, it's not really something that you're going to notice all too much over the sounds of battle. Track loops last for a few minutes at a time, and usually you'll just be hearing silence. Battle tracks also tend to play when in combat, but end almost immediately upon the defeat of an enemy, and they never really get the chance to shine. The feel of the music combines classical fantasy elements, but with a feeling of ethereal and occasionally tribal themes, and it's worth listening to when you can. It's just that it's another soundtrack that'll be far appreciated outside of the game. Sound is again at the forefront, with plenty of ambient noises playing in the background to better fit your current location, and battles are just as loud and bombastic as the effects, giving a real sense of chaos, especially during the Rift events. It can get pretty overwhelmingly loud, so again, look to adjust the sound as you see fit. There's also a bit of decent voice acting go around, but it's not as heavily voice acted as some MMOs, so don't expect to be bombarded by it as much as just have it punctuate certain scenes and boss fights. As expected when starting out, you'll notice there aren't as many servers to choose from since the move to free-to-play, but they do follow the faction PvP MMO tradition of being available in 3 versions. PvE for those who want to focus on the gameplay, PvP for those who want the ability to attack, or the threat of being attacked, by the opposing faction, and RP for those who wish to play in a more immersive environment as a character. For reference, I created my characters on Feyblight, the RP server. Free accounts are only given 2 slots to create characters with, so if you want more you'll have to go into the cash shop, or with the subscription option. There's not entirely too much you can do with the character creator. When starting out you choose between the Guardians or the Defiants, each with a set of 4 races, and each race having a few races with special racial abilities that really don't matter in the long run. In other words, you pick the one that you think looks cool. You might initially be disappointed by the apparent lack of classes, seeing there's only 4 to choose from: Warrior, Cleric, Rogue, and Mage. But I'll shortly explain in much further detail why this shouldn't bother you too much. Think of it more like choosing your armor class, as warriors wear plate, clerics wear chain, rogues leather, mages cloth. This choice also locks you into a few weapons that you can equip as well. Once your class is chosen, you'll be given a list of roles that you can perform. Again, I'll explain it more soon, but you can see what skills and playstyles are available to you before you choose them. One of these roles will also be displayed, but unavailable unless you own the Storm Legion expansion or have purchased new expansion souls. Again, explaining later. The character creator doesn't allow you to make any tweaks to your body over your height, but you have a fair amount of control over the color palette and various facial features, along with the expected things like facial markings and hairstyles. Off the bat, I'm going to warn you about something you'll probably see pop up more often than you'd like. If you notice a flashing coin icon on your screen with the no symbol running through it, you have been coin locked. This keeps you from being able to sell, trade, post, or retrieve auctions, send mail, delete characters, or anything a hacker might want to do to your account if they got a hold of it. In order to remove this status, you'll have to press the button and enter a code that'll be emailed to the address you've registered from. Some people, myself included, have been experiencing this every single time they log in, as it tends to be very sensitive to reset. Signing up for a mobile authenticator, like in Warcraft or SWTOR, does not override this issue, oddly enough, so you'll be entering that code every time on top of coin locks if you do sign up for one. But at least you'll get an in-game title of the Ironclad. Not sure if worth it. Depending on your faction, you start in one of 2 tutorial areas, where you'll be shown the very basics of the game as well as the backstory to your faction, and what's at stake. It's a pretty straightforward section of quests with little opportunity to explore, but it shouldn't take much longer than 10 or 20 minutes. If you've played World of Warcraft or any of the more standard fantasy world MMOs, you'll know how to control this. It's WASD to move, Q and E to strafe, space to jump, hotkey skills, target and click to attack. They do include a very interesting rear view feature by holding V that allows you to look directly behind you without having to spin the camera with the mouse. Get used to me saying that this game is like World of Warcraft. I'll try to avoid it as much as possible, but this game is unabashedly a WoW clone MMO. 2 warring factions, each with their own selection of races? Check. Sparkly corpses annotating a lootable item? Check. Color-coded item rarity ranging from gray, white, green, blue, and purple? Check. Walk back to your body in ghost form when you die, or take a long debuff that renders you worthless for several minutes? Check. Convoluted crafting system that forces you to collect hundreds of materials to make a dozen or more useless items just to learn how to make the next level item that still won't be as good as all the stuff you've already equipped? Check. If you're used to anything from WoW, chat commands, game mechanics, playstyles, you'll have Rift figured out pretty quickly. However, that's not to say they didn't do anything to tweak and refine the formula. In what way? Well, I guess I can talk about that soul tree I've been hinting at a few times now. At first glance, especially since you're at the start locked into choosing a specific class preset, the soul tree, accessible by pressing N, looks like your basic talent tree. You earn points during leveling up that you place into one of the 3 tree sections to better augment your character to a certain playstyle. Except it's much more complex than that. Instead of being locked into 3 specs for your class, you're given 3 souls to choose between. Each soul fits a certain role. How many points you place into one specific soul depends on the skills you'll learn as well. It might focus on a certain magic element. It might be designed for healing, control, or tanking. The key is choosing which 3 souls you want, which will complement each other the best, and what role you want to fill. Admittedly, for a newbie, this is extremely overwhelming, which is probably why you're asked to choose a spec when you create a character. But you can nullify this by choosing a skill from the soul tree not on the spec you chose, and the game will give you a warning if you do so. You can also later purchase more soul slots with in-game cash, which allow you to easily switch your souls on the fly. The genius thing about this system is it lets multiple classes take on multiple roles. Don't be entirely surprised if you do a random dungeon run and see that your tank is a rogue. This game will let you do that, as it lets you set aside multiple roles to take on dungeons in many different ways, or give you the viable option of soloing instead of shoehorning you into one type of playstyle. A nice feature that most souls, regardless of their role, work with the stats that are set for your class, so while it might be ideal to wear the best stuff more suited to your role, those stats will remain roughly the same, meaning you won't be forced to carry several sets of armor to fit your roles. This is a good thing because inventory space is ridiculously limited, for two reasons. The first is loot is dropping constantly. You'll have full bags in no time and end up playing triage by dumping out stuff to make room for the new stuff constantly. The second reason is that this game takes the WoW approach of giving you one large bag and making you scrounge for more slots with additional bags as you equip in extra slots. And if you're playing for free, you only have 2 of those bag slots. Early bags consist of only 4 to 6 extra slots, and decent space costs way more than you can afford by starting out. It's almost an insulting level of space to start with, and if you're not selling off useless items to vendors constantly, you will be hurting. Combine this with crafting mats, quest items, potions, and spare weapons for alternate sets, and you'll be screaming at the screen in frustration when you have no space for anything. Had I not been given 2 28-slot bags from a viewer, I probably would have given up in frustration by now. So, how do you get more bag slots? You pay for them, with cash shop credits. So, yeah. One item to keep an eye out for are the artifacts, collectible items that drop from enemies or can be simply found on the map. Once collected, right-click the item to send it to your artifact collection, which will both remove it from your inventory and add it to a list that, if completed, offers a lot of interesting awards. There's a bit of MMO meta humor in these collections as well, like the Critter Tears collection, which you'll get from murdering innocent animals wandering around the map. As I mentioned, equipment uses the standard color quality rarity system and is confined to your class. It's pretty easy to identify if an item is an upgrade in the game. However, if you find the new item that you're wearing is rather unfetching, or you'd rather have the look from your old piece, you can click on the Wardrobe tab from the character menu and equip any piece of armor to be displayed with that piece instead of your normal equipment, giving you the stats of your equipped piece with the look of any armor you wish. And when I say any armor, I mean any armor. As a mage, even if you can't equip a piece of warrior plate for the stats, you can equip it to the wardrobe, giving you the chance to wear that plate mail bikini you've always wanted. It's a fantastic feature for role players. You can also hide the look of any and all armor pieces, meaning you can have all the stats and protection from a full plate wearing warrior, but can still run around in your underwear. If anything, it's a great place to remove the visuals of these seriously ugly helmet designs in this game. The game takes WoW's copper, silver, gold currency standard and shifts it up the quality scale to silver, gold, and platinum. It's also far easier to earn the highest level currency, which is a good thing considering how expensive mounts are and how ludicrously expensive they can get from the more useful speeds. Luckily, you can also fast travel via the many portals scattered around the map for a small varying fee depending on distance. Money also comes into play with the WoW-esque death penalty. When you die, you have a few options. One lets you resurrect on the spot with the Soul Walk option, letting you slowly move away from the hostile area in ghost form to respawn with half your health. You have an hour-long cooldown with Soul Walk, and you can purchase more with paid cash if you desire. The other is to res at the graveyard, either walking back to your body in ghost form, or talking with the spirit who will offer to resurrect you with a bigger penalty to your soul vitality, and a long debuff that weakens you severely for a good while. This debuff can be removed, and your soul vitality can be restored by talking to any healer and paying a fee of in-game cash that increases depending on how much soul vitality you lost. You can choose to live with the vitality loss, but if it goes to or below 0%, you will start taking hits to your stats. Soul vitality will not replenish itself over time, so you will eventually need to pay to restore yourself to full again. Another similar system is the crafting system that'll seem overly familiar to WoW vets. You can choose from 3 crafting professions and 2 life professions. Life professions being survival, which is like cooking, and fishing, which is fishing. Crafting professions and gathering professions will count towards the other total, but you can pay to unlock up to 9. Crafting professions also have complementary systems that are required to be self-sufficient in that profession. For example, armorsmithing requires both mining and butchering materials, butchering being the equivalent of WoW's skinning profession. Luckily, you don't need any special tools to do gathering, as inventory space is choked as it is. Those interested with the concept of player housing might be really pleased with Rift, maybe not as much as Ion, but access is far easier. You're even given a player housing area, called Dimensions in this game, for free in an early quest, and you can pay to unlock more. You can even have multiple dimensions, invite friends, and decorate the areas with earned, bought, or crafted items, and scale, rotate, and position those items where you see fit. It's a lot of fun for those who always want to design a mini world for very little consequence, and host RP parties, as you can invite anyone into that area. I've put off talking about questing for quite some time now because frankly, it's pretty basic. Almost everything is as basic as it gets. Kill X and talk to Y. Kill X to gather Y. Gather X and talk to Y. While there are a few more interesting quests thrown into the mix, it's questing where Rift really doesn't innovate. Sure, some quests can be gathered out in the field, and some can be turned in with an interface button prompt, but there's really nothing here that many fantasy MMOs have not done already. I will say that if you like quests, there are a lot of them. NPCs have them, the world has them, enemies drop items that start them and lead into others. If you're MMOCD like me, you'll be far out-leveled for the area that you're in before you ever decide to leave it, simply because the quests just keep on coming. It's madness. At least there's little reason to just grind things beyond crafting, so I'll give it that. If you think I forgot a very important aspect of this game, something this game is unquestionably known for, I figured that's something better suited to the community section. I'm kinda torn here. It might just be free-to-play fervor, but if you spend more than 2 minutes reading the global level chat, you are going to hate it. The most insipid, troll-bait, ignorant conversations will take place here, and nothing worthwhile is ever said. Do yourself a massive favor and type /leave4 or /leave level, or you'll think that this game is swarming with idiots. It's seriously not a reflection of the general community in the slightest. A lot of these people are quite decent as long as they don't have a global megaphone to spew absurdity into. Aspects of the gameplay really lend itself well to a fostered community of cooperation, and that helps set this apart from other MMOs of this nature. For example, quest credit is shared among players, so there's no worry about having someone tag or steal a mob from you, as long as you take a swing at it. While loot is a different story, it's even possible that quest items will still be lootable from a killed mob, even if you didn't tag it. Secondly, joining and leaving a group is no issue. You can set your personal group to public or private, with public allowing anyone to show up and leave at will. Too many people for your group? Well, then it's automatically converted into a raid group. This comes in much more useful for the dynamic events I'll speak of shortly. If you have a high-level player friend who wants to help you in the game and you don't want them one-shotting everything that you fight, sapping all of your experience, all they have to do is right-click on your name and choose Mentor, and they'll be automatically taken down to your level, even with all their gear and skills intact, making the fight much more advantageous, but far more fair and interesting. Unlike the sidekick system from the now-defunct City of Heroes, this doesn't work in reverse, so you can't upgrade and join your friends to level 60. But at least it's something. Okay, here's a real shocking kicker, especially for something so similar to World of Warcraft. You know that opposing faction you're supposed to be at war with? You can join with them. You can talk to them, group with them, raid with them, marry them, whatever. As of the Storm Legion expansion, the factions have decided to combat a greater threat together, and they're no longer forced to fight with each other if they don't wish to. Wait, so two warring factions with completely differing ideals can finally come together and combat a much greater threat anytime they choose to. They're not being forced to fight to the death at the behest of their creators, under strong opposition of the players who should be in control of what actions they want to do. Are you listening, World of Warcraft? No, of course you're not. Instances, while accessible the traditional way, by forming a group and heading to their location in the world, can be accessed much easier with the Instance Finder. Just press I, queue for the dungeon and role you wish to play, and you'll be summoned to it when it's ready. If you get a group and dungeon chosen completely at random, you'll get a great monetary reward and a free piece of rare quality gear, which you can do 7 times per day. Instances even run cross-server, but be warned if someone loots a piece of gear that they don't need, and they're cross-server, they cannot trade it with you. You can also queue for Instant Adventures, which toss you into a series of rapid-fire quests in a large zone area. It's pretty much a good way to experience farm, but there's really not much to it in the way of substance, as the tasks are completely unrelated and nonsensical. It's like some military commander with ADD is just barking random orders at me. Go kill 6 wolves! Quick! Now go kill 10 undead! Alright, now pick 7 potatoes! These are all actual tasks that come up during the adventures, by the way. I'm not making this up. Now we get into the titular events that make this game what it is. As Talara is a world of shifting dimensions and elemental planes, these dimensions do their best to come break into the world, and this is where the Rift events come into play. During a Rift event, a portal will open up in the sky and enemies will station themselves around it. If they're not dealt with, these portals will consistently summon groups of dangerous enemies to march upon the towns and attempt to claim areas for themselves. In order to fight them back, you'll need to group up with other players to fight back the waves and eventually seal the rift, until they show up again later on. Rift events are a very welcome distraction from the general playstyle of the quests, giving you the option to deal with and get rewards from far more pressing matters than the simple I need 12 spider egg stuff that's all too present in the regular questing system. They're also a marvel to look at where the game's effects really shine. Rift events might even blow up into full zone events, where the entire area will come under siege with many rifts at once, spawning not only invading forces, but massive bosses that will require a lot of players to take them down efficiently. With the constant threat of the world coming under siege, it definitely breathes new life into the simple go here, do this, get stronger that plagues so many fantasy MMOs. But having a quest system still gives you a good set path to follow, and gives you multiple options to fight and live in this world. It's a system that Guild Wars 2 didn't exactly get correct, but Rift had right for years now. Final kicker, I did roll on an RP server, but even with the worthless general chat and more than occasional terrible name, I saw a lot of active RP going on, and that shocked me. Nowadays, especially on a free-to-play game, RP is all but dead. But seeing players roleplay openly in areas, and even finding out that community managers have appeared in the general chats to scold trolling players, is something that I have never seen Blizzard do for its RP community. Will this kind of thing hold up in the long run? It's not my call to say it, but at this rate, and with the wardrobe and dimension systems in place, something that Blizzard seems vehemently against, there's a decent shot. I seriously wish the best for Rift. Stay the course, Trion. Okay, former subbers, you're probably wondering how they converted this game if you haven't played in a while. Did they go sub-hybrid, truly free, SWTOR level restrictive? It's a little of all three, really. I've made it clear, along with a lot of the community it seems, that the bag slot restriction borders on ludicrous, especially with the WoW-style bag system in place, and it renders the newbie experience absolutely miserable if you don't get high-end bags. Also, it seems all too common to restrict character slots to only 2, and altaholics like myself will probably start twitching in annoyance. However, subbing does alleviate those issues, and the rest of the cash shop doesn't seem filled with things that seem outright required. Buying creds for the game can be pricey, but you can get more for free if you buy them in larger quantities. Getting more bag slots, the most imperative item, isn't actually found in the cash shop, instead requiring you to right-click on one of the locked slots and choosing to spend the credits when the window pops up. Considering each slot goes for over $5 makes it a bit of a toss-up. You can also buy larger bags with cash shop cash, an action made completely pointless if you know a high-level player who's willing to craft you some decent ones. Note that you can use in-game cash or credits to purchase the bags. You can also sell your items in this cash shop, giving you a portable store anywhere in the world. Just find a tab where you could buy something with in-game cash, and boom, there's the sell gray items block. Would have been nice if I'd figured that out before dumping off so much potential income. Character slots can also be purchased here, and it's not all that cheap, but consider it if you're looking to try out more characters. The wardrobe feature can also be enhanced with plenty of stat-useless clothing that can be slotted so you can take a completely new appearance. There's not much to look at right now, but the potential for expansion and community feedback is something that I'd look into and keep an eye on. You can also buy statless weapons to transmogrify into other looks, with a required item that is also sold here in the cash shop. If you ever wanted to beat someone to death with a bouquet of flowers, you have found your game. Mounts can also be purchased here, and despite being extremely expensive with in-game cash, the alternative of getting the best horse with credits isn't present right away, as mounts tend to be either level-locked and cosmetic mounts that'll only override the look of your existing mount. Make sure that you know which one you're purchasing. This game is also pretty heavy into the idea of cosmetic pets, so there's plenty to choose from here if that's your thing. The aforementioned dimension system is also located here, letting you buy much more fantastic areas and furniture if you're that into the idea of player housing. Take your time, shop around, and decide if credits or in-game cash is the best way to obtain some of your more desired items. One final thing of note is the loyalty system, which unlocks rewards the more you spend on the game. Spending as little as $5 will unlock some of the features that you're locked out of initially, like being able to sell items on the auction house. Buying regular mounts with credits is inversely really cheap, so consider even this small investment if you plan on sticking with the game at all. Rift is considered to be the WoW clone to end all WoW clones by many, and while it's not certainly breaking too much new ground in terms of recent MMOs, with things like Guild Wars 2 dynamic event focus, a Secret World and SWTOR story focus, it's still an excellent refining of WoW's formula, and if you liked how WoW played but didn't like the direction it was headed, and the general attitude and disdain the company seems to have for its players now, or, most obviously, the fact it still costs monthly to play, Rift is a fantastic alternative for no monetary investment. However, since this doesn't think too far outside the fantasy MMO box, if you don't like or are tired of the basic fantasy theme park MMO, this probably isn't going to win you over. Here's my final rating. Delving into a lot of areas WoW never dared to tread, like allowing cross-faction play, multiple complex talent builds for classes, dynamic events, and so much more, Rift seems to be the game looking to refine what already works for so many. As a former sub-game and a very well-liked former sub-game, Rift also contains the best presentation in a free-to-play without taking too much of the SWTOR route of restrict all the things. It's probably one of the best free-to-plays on the market right now in presentation alone. With many features focused on RP, like cross-faction play, fully customizable armor sets, dimension-styled player housing, and a community that seems at least willing to roleplay openly, those of you forced out of other MMOs for daring to play your character as a character and not a gear-farming swearbot might find refuge here. Get on the appropriate server and give it a shot. Character slot restrictions are detrimental to a role player and altaholic, so you might be reaching for a few more within no time. Also, considering just how required having a decent-sized inventory is to playing this game for any length of time, unlocking a bag slot will be your best option if you don't have someone willing to craft you much more useful ones. Finally, as a sub-hybrid, those annoying restrictions can be alleviated easily by subbing, and if you're already willing to sub to this game once, you might as well keep going if you'd like to support it. Restrictions on bags in a fantasy and loot-based MMO is always a bit of a cheap shot, and some people find this too much to have to deal with. Despite the game as a whole being much more forgiving than SWTOR was at free-to-play launch, sometimes it can only take one thing to make people throw up their hands in frustration and say, "I'm done." I cannot stress this enough. Don't bother with general chat. It's seriously horrific, and it almost immediately turned me off of the game. After knowing it wasn't a direct reflection of the community at large, it was easier to deal with, but if you're hoping for a peaceful experience, don't wait a second to leave that channel and never look back. Finally, I had many come to me and say, well, what separates this from World of Warcraft? I didn't see enough of a difference. And if that statement alone is enough to turn you away from the game, it's not entirely untrue. If your time with WoW and fantasy theme park MMOs is over, Rift isn't going to bring you back unless you seriously miss those days. Next time I'll be looking to a title that's slowly gaining a lot of attention, especially since it's been announced as next-gen console port, despite it still being an open beta.